Alright, so in previous video we coded a logic to play a game of craps. In this video we'll continue, but we are going to calculate and display some interesting statistics about the game. We are going to answer 4 questions. Question 1, how many games are won on the first roll, second roll, third roll, all the way up to 20th roll, and after the 20th roll. Also, how many games are lost on the first roll, second roll, all the way up to 20th roll, and after the 20th roll. So we will calculate individual games, and we will see how many rolls it took to win or lose. Next question we will answer is, what are the chances of winning at craps? And we should discover that craps is one of the fairest casino games. So we'll see. And lastly, what is the average length of the game of craps? In other words, how many rolls on average each game lasts. Alright, enough talking, let's code. So we'll just continue coding, and obviously since we are to calculate statistics, first thing is of course to create a class that will be used for that. And I cannot think of any better name for the class than statistics. So at the core of all the statistics we need to calculate are the winning and losing games. We need to have a way to collect data for each game and store if the game was won or lost. And for that, arrays will do the trick. I am going to create 2 arrays, one that will collect winning games and one that will collect losing games. Now I want the arrays to retain the values and to keep adding to these arrays after each game, so I will declare them as static. Notice that I declare these arrays with 22 indexes. So that makes it from index 0 to 21. Remember the requirement. We are to show how many games were won in round 1, how many were won in round 2, all the way up to round 20. And then we also need to show how many games were won in the more rounds than 20. So the index 1 will show how many games were won in round 1, index 2 will show how many games were won in round 2, and of course index 20 will show how many games were won in round 20. And then the index 21 will show how many games were won in round 21 or more. We will not keep statistics for each round past the 20 rounds. And we can do the same for array that will track the lost game, of course. Okay, so now we can create a function that will calculate the probability of winning. The function will return the number that will represent the probability, so for that, double will work the best. Alright, so how do we calculate the probability? Well, quite simple actually. We will add together all the wins and then divide by a sum of all games. And to calculate the sum of all games, we simply add together all the winning and all the losing games. The game is either lost or won, so when we add together all the winning games and all the losing games, we get a total of games that were played. And to do that, we will use an array method of sum. To code it, it will look like this. So I sum all the winning games using the array method sum. That I do want to keep the result as decimal, and in this case it's double. Alright, so I have my sum of all the games that were won, and then I divide that number with all the games played. And since, like I said, the game can only be won or lost, I simply sum all wins and I sum all losses and I just add them together. So this is the formula to calculate the probability of winning. Now let's create a method that will display the statistics. A simple void method. Let's declare a variable first. So that's my variable that will hold the result of the calculation for probability. And now we can assign it a value returned from the probability of winning function. So the probability equals the probability of winning, and we are basically calling the function that will calculate the probability and return it and assign it to our probability variable here. So now we can simply display the result. So it will basically say chances of winning the game of craps are, and then the number, and I am formatting it to display as percentage. Alright, now let's go and make some changes in the Craps game class. And the first thing we need to do is we need a variable that will be our number of games we want to play. And since the number is fixed and we don't want to change it, I can declare it as constant. So I'll go to the top of my class, and where the variables are, I'm going to create a constant called number of games. So here's my constant, and for now I'm going to set it to 5. Basically, we are going to play 5 games. This way it'll be easy to manually verify the calculations and see if they work correctly. So next we need the object statistics. So here's my statistics object, and I'm going to have it as private because I'm only going to use it within this class. Now I'm going to create a constructor for the Craps game class, and I'm going to initialize the object in it, and I will also place the rolled dice initialization in the constructor as well. So here's my constructor, and I'm going to remove the initialization from here for the roll dice, and I'm gonna place it in the Craps game constructor, and I'm going to initialize the statistics object as well. Now we don't have to have it in constructor, but I think it looks better than having everything initialized up here within our class. Alright, so the next thing, we need to modify the play method. So let's find the play method. Here it is. So we want to play 5 games, so obviously we need to place loop in there. And I'm going to create a simple for loop that loops until we reach the desired number of games. So up here I'm going to start a loop, and we are looping until the number of games, and we are iterating by 1. And I'm going to place everything that was in the method play. I'm gonna cut it and paste it within the loop. So basically I'm going to play 5 games one after another. So next I'll create a simple separator between the games. It's just a visual thing, something that will show the game's number, and it'll be easy to tell where each game starts and where it finishes. I'm just displaying a bunch of stars and the game number, and I am adding +1 to it over here. That's because our first loop is through index 0, which is our game 1. And index 1 represents game 2, index 2 represents game 3, and so forth. That's why I have to add I+1 to display the actual game number. Now remember, we are playing games in consecutive order. Once game finishes, the status is either win or lose. So after each game finishes, we need to set the game status to continue, so we can play the next game. I'll set my game status to continue. And of course, at the end of each game, before we start the next one, we also need to reset the number of rolls to 0, so the next game starts with no rolls. So before we roll, I'm going to set the number of rolls to 0. So that's before we actually roll the dice. Keep in mind that the game finishes in 2 different ways. First, it finishes after the very first round, or after the very first roll, which would be this portion of the code. Or if it doesn't, then we go into a while loop and we keep playing until we roll the point, or number 7, in which case the game finishes. Then we go back to our for loop, we initialize everything again and play the next game. So basically we still play the game the same way we did before. Like I said, either it finishes after the first round or the game continues within the while loop. And in both cases, once the game finishes, we go back to the for loop and start another game. And again, we first display the game number and we reset the game status and the number of rolls. And finally, after we play all the games, after the loop finishes, we can display the statistics. In this case, we are going to display the probability of winning. We already have object statistics initiated in our constructor, so we have access to the public method of the class. So we can simply call the display statistics method. Remember that is after our for loop finishes. So I'll have my statistics dot display statistics method called here, and it will display the result.